Every family has its secrets, but the secrets in this family could kill. In a remote, fog-shrouded part of the countryside stands an ancient mansion, towering over its surroundings as if guarding the shadows within. The mansion is surrounded by old, gnarled trees with barren branches that stretch toward the sky like skeletal hands. These trees seem to blend with the thick mist clinging to the ground, muffling any sounds and creating an eerie stillness. The mansion itself is massive and worn, its once proud walls now peeling and cracked, as if bearing the weight of generations of mystery and misfortune. The windows are broken, their frames splintered and dark, and only a faint light flickers sporadically from a few rooms, casting brief, ominous shadows across the walls. Inside, silence reigns, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards and the rhythmic tapping of branches against the windows. The entire house feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something or someone. Inside this forsaken place, Claire steps into her mother's hidden legacy. Just days ago, she lost her mother, a woman who had kept this house and its history a secret all her life. Claire never imagined she would set foot in this place, yet her mother, in her final days, hinted at the answers hidden here, answers to questions Claire had never even thought to ask. Strong and resilient, Claire feels the deep weight of grief, but is also driven by a mysterious pull to understand her family's past. The journey to the mansion has ignited a quiet determination within her to uncover the secrets her mother guarded so closely. But Claire isn't alone. Her estranged uncle, a tall, brooding man with a look of perpetual unease, has also returned to the mansion. He's a man of few words, his glances restless, as if every corner of the house holds a memory he would rather forget. Claire can sense his discomfort and how he seems to avoid certain rooms, almost as if he's afraid of what he might find there. His behavior only deepens her resolve to uncover whatever the family has tried to bury. This family's history is dark, woven with tales of tragedy and whispered rumors of a curse. The locals speak of misfortune that has plagued the family for generations, leaving a lingering presence that even they dare not disturb. Claire's great-grandfather, they say, was a ruthless man, ruling over his family with an iron fist, leaving a legacy of fear that seems to pulse within the walls of this mansion. But it's not just the man. It's the house itself that seems alive with secrets, as though the very stones remember every sorrow, every loss, and every ghost that has passed through. Relatives, they say, have tried to unlock the mysteries hidden within these walls, only to be met with ruin or madness. But for Claire, the search for understanding feels like the only way forward, even if it means confronting horrors that others could not survive. She's haunted by the feeling that her mother's death left unfinished business, and she's come here to find answers, knowing that the truth she seeks might demand more from her than she's ready to give. As she steps deeper into the shadows of the house, Claire can almost feel the walls closing in around her, as though the mansion itself is warning her to turn back. It's as if every creak, every shadow, is a reminder of the stories that linger here, stories that refuse to be forgotten. Yet with every step, Claire feels an unshakable pull, like the house itself is challenging her to dig deeper, to uncover what it has hidden for so long. This journey into her family's past is just beginning, and Claire knows that whatever awaits her here could change her forever, or swallow her whole. Claire's resolve to uncover the truth about her family's haunted past only deepens as she explores the mansion's dark and dusty rooms. With each day, the mansion seems to pull her further into its secrets, as though it's feeding on her curiosity. Rooms that seemed closed to her before now open willingly, as if inviting her in, revealing fragments of a story she barely understands. She discovers a bedroom frozen in time, with a child's toys scattered on the floor and a thick layer of dust covering everything. A photograph sits on the nightstand, showing a young girl with wide eyes that seem to pierce through the years. It's an image she's seen before in her mother's old albums, but had never connected to this place. Her heart sinks as she realizes the girl might have been another family member who vanished, swallowed up by the family curse, leaving behind only echoes of a life cut short. Days pass, and her nights become filled with eerie sounds that startle her awake. Every creak and whisper feels like a ghostly reminder of those who came before her and were trapped by the same secrets she is determined to unravel. Shadows creep across her walls, flickering in ways that don't match the light, as if someone or something is watching her. And though she tries to ignore them, the whispers grow louder, more insistent, calling her name in voices both familiar and unknown. It's as if the mansion itself is alive, holding onto the spirits of her ancestors, refusing to let them rest until someone breaks the chain of suffering that binds them. The only other soul in the mansion is her uncle, who seems increasingly anxious and unhinged. He becomes more unpredictable, wandering the halls at odd hours, muttering to himself about promises and sins. His behavior grows more erratic, and he warns her not to delve too deeply into the mansion's history, his voice trembling with fear she can't quite understand. Claire tries to confront him, pressing him for answers, but he shuts her down with a chilling look, saying, "There are things here that can't be undone. Don't go looking for what you don't want to find." His words only fuel her curiosity and add to the tension between them. One night, Claire finds a hidden door at the end of a dark hallway. Pushing it open, she discovers her great-grandfather's study, preserved almost perfectly, as if it's waiting for his return. The room is filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. Heavy, dark curtains block out any hint of light, and the air is thick and stale, carrying the faint scent of something burnt. The walls are lined with shelves full of old books on arcane subjects, their spines cracked and faded. On the desk, she finds a dusty journal that belonged to her great-grandfather, its cover worn and fragile. As she opens it, a chill runs down her spine. The journal entries start innocently enough, with notes about the family's prosperity and plans to expand their wealth. But soon, the writing becomes erratic, the handwriting uneven and desperate. Her great-grandfather writes about a dark force he believed haunted the family, a force he tried to appease through rituals he called offerings. He speaks of hearing voices and feeling a presence watching him, following him even in his sleep. His descent into paranoia is disturbingly detailed, and Claire feels her heart race as she reads about his belief that the family's fortune came at a cost, the sacrifice of his own bloodline to keep the darkness at bay. He describes how each generation would have to make an offering to keep the family safe, an offering that took the form of a life lost in the shadows of the mansion. Claire realizes with horror that her great-grandfather might have orchestrated the deaths of family members, believing that these sacrifices would protect the others. The journal suggests that he performed rituals in the basement, a place no one dared to enter after his death. The final entries are filled with scribbled warnings, as if he knew he was slipping into madness. "The house will claim what it wants," he wrote. "No one is safe. The curse lives on through blood." This revelation sends Claire reeling. She starts to suspect that her mother, too, was a victim of this curse, someone who knew about it but couldn't escape its grip. She remembers hints her mother dropped in her final days, words that seemed strange at the time. Warnings to stay away from the past, to let go of questions that had no answers. Could her mother have been trying to protect her from the same fate? The thought chills her to the bone. The curse wasn't just a series of tragic accidents. It was something her family had lived with, something that had been passed down, claiming one victim after another. Determined to break free from this legacy, Claire continues her investigation, even as the mansion seems to close in around her. She starts to lose track of time, unsure of whether it's day or night, feeling trapped in a place that exists beyond ordinary reality. She's haunted by visions of her ancestors, appearing in mirrors, caught in her peripheral vision, whispering secrets she can't fully understand. One day, she finds her uncle in a frenzy, tearing through a room as if looking for something. When she confronts him, he snaps, his voice filled with a mixture of fear and fury. "You think you can stop this?" he yells. "This curse is bigger than you, bigger than any of us. It's in our blood." In the days that follow, Claire senses that the house is actively working against her. Doors that were once open are now locked, and the windows refuse to budge. The once dim flickers of light have grown darker, casting ominous shadows that seem to follow her every move. She feels an intense pressure weighing down on her, a suffocating force that grows stronger the closer she gets to the truth. The mansion seems to pulse with a life of its own, its very walls breathing and shifting, as though it's aware of her intentions and is fighting back. Claire's breaking point comes when she discovers a trapdoor hidden under a faded rug in one of the unused rooms. The trapdoor leads to a narrow staircase, descending into a basement that feels like the heart of the mansion's darkness. The air is thick and damp, and every step she takes echoes ominously, as though the house itself is whispering warnings for her to turn back. When she reaches the bottom, she finds a room filled with strange symbols scrawled on the walls, candles melted down to stubs, and an altar of sorts, littered with trinkets that belonged to family members who had passed. The room feels charged with a malevolent energy, as if centuries of fear and suffering have soaked into the very stones. As Claire takes in the horrific scene, she hears a voice, faint at first, then growing louder. It's her uncle, his voice trembling with desperation. "It was supposed to keep us safe," he says, appearing at the edge of the room, his face twisted in a mix of guilt and terror. "All these sacrifices, all the pain. It was meant to protect us, to keep the curse at bay. But it only made it stronger." In this moment, Claire realizes that her uncle has been complicit in keeping the curse alive, driven by a twisted sense of duty to the family legacy. He believed, as her great-grandfather did, that the curse could be managed, that by sacrificing family members, they could keep the darkness from consuming them all. The truth crashes down on her, a horrifying legacy built on blood and fear. As Claire confronts her uncle, she realizes that the curse is not a supernatural force but a manifestation of generations of trauma, guilt, and blind tradition. The house, a symbol of the family's obsession with power and control, has become a prison for those who sought to break free. Her uncle, broken by the weight of the curse, collapses to the floor, weeping, finally acknowledging the horrors they've inflicted upon each other in the name of protection. Determined to end this cycle, Claire decides to burn the journal and destroy the remnants of her great-grandfather's rituals. As she sets fire to the symbols and letters in the basement, she feels the mansion shake, as if resisting her attempt to break free. But as the flames rise, she senses a release, a long-suppressed energy dissipating, leaving a profound silence in its wake. For the first time, Claire feels a weight lift from her shoulders. The whispers and shadows fade, and she emerges from the basement feeling a renewed sense of purpose. As she leaves the mansion for good, she knows she has severed the chain that bound her family to its haunted past, freeing herself and the generations to come. The family's deadly legacy has been put to rest, allowing Claire to reclaim her life from the shadows of her ancestors. In the dimly lit basement, the tension between Claire and her uncle mounts, crackling in the air like static. Claire's heart races as she stares at him, watching the shadows of uncertainty and something much darker dance across his face. They are surrounded by relics of the family's haunted past, old journals, dusty portraits, and symbols etched into the walls, each object a reminder of the horror their ancestors endured and perpetuated. But now, The truth is finally exposed, raw and unforgiving, and Claire's uncle is unraveling, caught between guilt and a fanatical belief in the curse that has haunted their bloodline. He mutters to himself, words that echo fragments of the old rituals and sacrifices once performed in secret, a devotion passed down through the generations like a twisted inheritance. The journals and family stories had always alluded to an offering that could end the curse, and in his fractured mind, he has come to believe that Claire is that offering. The weight of responsibility bears down on him, and as Claire realizes this, a chill runs through her. He's not just willing to let her suffer the fate of past generations. He's prepared to ensure it, convinced that she's the key to finally ending this cycle of torment. Claire takes a deep, steadying breath and tries to reach him, speaking with a voice firm and steady. She explains that the curse isn't some dark force hanging over them. It's a chain forged by the fear and trauma embedded in their family's history. But her words seem to fall on deaf ears. Her uncle's gaze is distant, possessed by the legacy of duty he believes he must uphold. The flickering candlelight casts shadows on his face, highlighting the hollowness in his eyes. He mutters about duty and sacrifice, sounding as though he is channeling the voices of their ancestors, convinced that without Claire's compliance, their family is doomed. The room itself seems to press in around them, filled with the weight of their ancestors' secrets and obsessions. Claire realizes she has little time to act. That reason alone won't break through the centuries-old grip the curse has on her uncle's mind. Desperation bubbles up in her, and she grabs the family journal from a nearby table. The same journal that has recorded the twisted legacy of her family's sacrifices over the generations. In a moment of defiance, she thrusts the journal toward the flames of the candle, watching as the edges of the pages start to blacken and curl. Her uncle's reaction is immediate and panicked. He lunges forward, his voice filled with a mix of horror and desperation, pleading for her to stop. To him, she isn't just burning paper. She's desecrating what he believes is their last hope for redemption. But Claire doesn't falter. She watches as the words, the dark symbols, the rituals, the haunting entries detailing each ancestor's descent into madness, disintegrate into ash. The room fills with the smell of burnt paper, a strangely satisfying scent, as if the curse itself is beginning to unravel. Her uncle staggers back, his face a mask of anguish and rage, watching helplessly as the remnants of his lifelong beliefs turn to dust. In that instant, a shift occurs in the air, a tangible feeling that the mansion itself has lost its hold, its long-sustained grip slipping away. Yet, even as the symbols turn to ash, Claire's uncle remains unwavering in his belief. He speaks with the tone of a man possessed, insisting that without a final sacrifice, they will never be free. She watches as he reaches into his coat, pulling out a small, aged blade, the same one used by their ancestors in the grim rituals they believed would spare the family from the curse's wrath. His hand trembles, but his resolve remains terrifyingly clear. He truly believes that she must fulfill this dark destiny. Seeing the blade, Claire feels an intense rush of fear, but also an overwhelming sense of resolve. She knows that she has to end this cycle now, to break the family's deadly legacy, or risk being consumed by it. Summoning every ounce of courage, she takes a step forward, meeting his eyes with defiance, refusing to play the role of the victim. She tells him that she is not an offering, that she will not be part of this ritual, and that the curse, if it ever existed, is only alive because they let it haunt them. Her uncle's face contorts with a mix of fear, anger, and something deeper, a lingering attachment to a purpose he has clung to for years. His voice wavers as he warns her of the consequences, claiming that the curse will consume them both if the ritual isn't completed. He raises the blade, desperation flashing in his eyes as he takes a step closer. Claire, quick and determined, catches his wrist mid-swing, and a fierce struggle ensues. Their breaths come in gasps as they grapple, each fighting for control, their struggle not just physical but symbolic of the battle between freedom and the chains of their family's past. The basement fills with the sounds of their fight, an echo of the struggle that has plagued their family for centuries. Shadows flicker across the walls, the flickering candle casting chaotic shapes that seem almost alive, as though the mansion itself is watching, caught in the throes of its own dissolution. Claire feels the weight of the family's history pressing down on her, but her resolve only strengthens. She manages to twist the blade from her uncle's hand, sending it clattering to the floor, a sound that reverberates through the silence that follows. Defeated and drained, her uncle falls to his knees, his face a mix of fear and profound regret. He looks up at Claire, his broken gaze reflecting a shattered belief system that has finally come undone. She stands over him, victorious not only in their struggle, but over the twisted legacy that once bound her family. In a final gesture, she takes the family crest, an emblem that had once represented power but now serves only as a reminder of their tragic past, and she hurls it into the smoldering embers of the candle. As the metal begins to glow and deform, Claire feels a profound lightness, as if the curse itself is disintegrating along with it. The mansion, once heavy with darkness, feels almost lighter, as if the chains holding it in place have finally been broken. The silence that follows is deep and freeing, an unburdening that marks the end of an era of suffering. Claire looks back at her uncle, who watches with a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. The weight of the curse has been lifted, but he is left empty, his life's purpose dissolved along with the ashes. Together, they ascend from the basement, stepping into the dim light of the mansion's main hall. The rooms no longer seem haunted, the shadows merely shadows, no longer harboring the weight of their ancestors. The mansion, once a symbol of dread, now stands as a relic, stripped of its dark influence. They walk through it in silence, each step a reclaiming of freedom from the prison of their family's legacy. In the days that follow, Claire leaves the mansion behind, choosing to live free from the burdens her family once carried. Her uncle, now a shadow of his former self, stays behind, but there is no malice left in him, only the sorrow of a life spent chasing a false redemption. Claire knows that the mansion and her family's past will always be a part of her, but she has reclaimed her own future. The darkness that once claimed her ancestors has finally been put to rest. As the flames in the basement fade, Claire feels an overwhelming sense of release wash over her. The mansion, so oppressive moments ago, now seems hollow and lifeless, stripped of the darkness that had bound her family for generations. She steps away from the smoldering remnants of the journals, the symbols, and the twisted relics of her family's past, leaving them behind in the damp shadows of the cellar. Her uncle, still in the basement, sits in silent disbelief, watching the embers cool as though his entire world has unraveled. Moving through the once menacing hallways, Claire senses a shift within herself, a lightness she hasn't felt since her arrival. The house that had held such a suffocating weight over her now seems strangely quiet, as if its walls are acknowledging the end of an era. Each step she takes through the mansion is deliberate, a quiet act of reclaiming her agency and identity, things that her family's dark legacy had nearly stolen from her. She feels the absence of a presence she had grown accustomed to, a subtle, lingering darkness that has now lifted. Outside, dawn begins to break, casting the first rays of light across the mansion's facade, washing away shadows with soft gold and pink hues. Claire stands in the main hall and watches the sun peek over the horizon, a symbol of renewal. The silence in the mansion now feels peaceful, no longer haunted by the whispers and memories of the past. She walks to a large window, taking in the sight of the grounds bathed in early morning light. It's as if the estate itself is breathing a sigh of relief, as if it too has been freed from its own burden. Upstairs, Claire's uncle eventually ascends from the basement, appearing almost like a specter of his former self. He's still in shock, eyes vacant and hollow, holding onto fragments of a belief system he can no longer trust. For years, he was a guardian of the family's secrets, carrying the weight of the curse with a kind of twisted pride. But now, stripped of that purpose, he seems fragile, uncertain of where he belongs in this new reality. The curse that defined his life has vanished, and he is left facing the emptiness of his convictions. Claire approaches him gently, sensing his vulnerability. She suggests he leave the mansion, start over somewhere new, somewhere far from the legacy that consumed him. Her words are kind, filled with a compassion that even surprises her, given everything he put her through. He nods slowly, perhaps seeing the truth in her words, but struggling to accept it. They stand in silence for a moment, two souls forever changed by the family's legacy, bound together by their shared history but no longer imprisoned by it. As the day unfolds, Claire begins the process of packing, preparing to leave the mansion behind for good. She walks through each room one last time, bidding farewell to the artifacts and memories that had haunted her. She pauses by old portraits, gazes at faded photographs, and glances at items that had once filled her with dread. Now, they simply seem like relics of another time, echoes of people who could not escape their own choices. She feels a profound sense of gratitude and sorrow for those who came before her, recognizing their pain but determined not to let it define her future. Throughout her final walk through the mansion, Claire notices subtle, almost gentle reminders of the family members she never knew but had always felt connected to. The hallway mirror, once covered in dust, now reflects her face clearly, as if the house itself is acknowledging her place in the family's story while releasing her from it. She stops before the family crest, an artifact of pride and fear, and touches it one last time. But unlike her ancestors, who clung to it, she feels no attachment, only the satisfaction of knowing she has closed a chapter that was not hers to carry. Outside, the grounds have come alive with the morning light. Birds sing, and a gentle breeze rustles the leaves, sounds that had seemed muted before, swallowed by the house's oppressive silence. Claire takes a deep breath, filling her lungs with the crisp morning air, a tangible sign of freedom. She steps onto the path that will lead her away from the mansion, glancing back only once. The house stands as it always has, imposing and grand, yet now it feels like a mere building, not the monster she once perceived. As she walks away, she thinks about her future, a future no longer defined by the shadows of her family's past. She knows that the scars of her experience will remain, but she embraces them as part of her journey, not chains holding her back. For the first time in her life, she feels a sense of clarity, a purpose that is her own. She realizes that breaking the curse wasn't just about survival. It was about reclaiming her story, her identity, and her power. Back inside, her uncle remains in the house, left with the daunting task of reconciling his past actions with the freedom Claire has given him. The shadows around him are gone, but the emptiness remains, a reminder of a life lived in service to a legacy that no longer exists. He watches Claire's retreating figure from a window, a look of sorrow and loss clouding his face. His role as the keeper of the family's dark legacy is over, leaving him adrift in a world that has moved on without him. As Claire steps further away from the mansion, the weight of her past finally lifts, leaving her with a lightness she hadn't dared to hope for. She walks with renewed purpose, ready to begin a life unburdened by a legacy she never chose. The memory of her ancestors will always be with her, but now she can honor them without letting their mistakes dictate her path. Her family's story has ended, but hers is just beginning, filled with possibilities that, until now, had seemed impossible. Claire reaches the edge of the estate grounds, the vast mansion behind her now just a silhouette against the morning sky. With each step, she feels lighter, as though shedding 1,000 invisible threads that once held her to a past she hadn't chosen. The haunting memories, the oppressive silence, and the creeping shadows are left behind, and for the first time, she feels truly free. The air seems fresher, each breath renewing her spirit. She has not only escaped the walls of her family's legacy, but also untethered herself from the expectations and fears that had kept her chained. She stands still for a moment, her heart filled with the promise of a future shaped by her own choices. Turning back for one last look, she sees the mansion, old and crumbling yet enduring, just as it has for generations. But now, it's only a monument to a past she has put to rest. She realizes it no longer feels threatening, nor does it hold any power over her. Instead, it stands as a relic of another time, another family bound by different beliefs. The house, with all its secrets and curses, remains, but she has carved a path away from it, choosing to honor her life and future rather than the legacy that nearly consumed her. Claire's journey was one of survival, but it was also one of growth. She recognizes the strength it took to confront her family's dark past and the courage it took to let it go. It wasn't just about breaking the curse. It was about releasing herself from the hold of a history she was born into but never asked for. She acknowledges the scars left by her journey, not as marks of suffering, but as symbols of her resilience and determination. In those scars, she finds power, a reminder of what she's overcome and how far she's come. As she walks toward her future, she reflects on her family's story with compassion rather than anger. She realizes that her ancestors, too, were prisoners of their own fears and choices, entangled in a legacy that demanded obedience. Her journey allowed her to see that they were not just figures in portraits, but real people, flawed and frightened, doing what they thought was necessary to survive. In understanding them, she finds closure, not as a victim of their choices, but as someone who is broken free and can now forge her own life without the weight of their mistakes. As the day unfolds, Claire feels a deep gratitude for the strength and wisdom she has gained. The curse may have been a burden, but it also taught her to fight for herself, to value freedom, and to redefine what family means. Her journey taught her that true family isn't bound by blood alone. It's bound by choices, compassion, and the courage to break free from what no longer serves. In that moment of reflection, she knows her story doesn't end with the curse or the mansion. It continues in every decision she makes, every path she chooses, and every new beginning she embraces. For anyone watching her story unfold, Claire's journey is a reminder that we all carry parts of our past, but we have the power to shape our futures. Her story invites us to question the legacies we inherit and decide which parts we will carry forward and which we will leave behind. It challenges us to find our own strength, even when facing the shadows of history, and to recognize that every ending brings the possibility of a new beginning. Her courage becomes an invitation to examine our own lives and take steps toward the freedom to be our truest selves. As the screen fades, the last image is of Claire walking confidently into the sunrise, a symbol of resilience and renewal. Her figure grows smaller in the distance, but her story lingers, echoing a powerful message that the past may shape us, but it does not have to define us. The future is always waiting, a blank canvas ready for us to paint with our own colors. And as her story concludes, it leaves viewers with one final question, a quiet yet profound call to action. What part of your own legacy are you ready to let go? And what future are you prepared to create in its place?